Because as has been said, if you don't have a good business model, where you're producing a maximized profit, you don't have a company, you don't provide employment. And in fact, that argument goes both ways, because I would use that same argument on my folks and say, look, we want successful companies. We want companies that are into what they do, that like the product that they're producing, so they're producing jobs for us. Their job is to maximize profit. But that doesn't mean that we don't have good employers out there that really like what they're producing, that are into it. I mean, and these towboat companies, hardcore, nuts and bolts, maritime companies, were really into being in the maritime business. Really loved, the vessels and the culture and the crews, frankly. The stuff that they did, they really loved it. A lot of them did. So, this all kind of comes around to, in my view, on how do we positively affect that in labor? How do we positively affect that business culture? And so, in thinking about Margaret's question as well, in effect, the conversation we had, which was why don't we have union employers involved in this process, I kind of went into the reality that I deal with. Not all this is well researched, not all this gets into economic detail, but unionized employers typically are mature companies. And they come from a time when labor standards weren't something that affected the business, really. And new companies, emerging companies, because the condition of a labor force, either domestic or through contractors, positively or negative, can affect the business. That becomes something that makes good business sense to have a program that provides for some labor standards. Now, this is being done by some companies that really want to do that. They really like being able to be in an environment where they can provide positive employment and labor standards. Some companies are just doing it because it's good for the bottom line. And it's that, in my view, inconsistency is where we kind of play a role. Because, and before I go any further, I do want to say that I'm not really trying to come from a podium here, that we've got, labor's got all the answers, that we do everything right, that we don't have our own bureaucratic problems that we struggle with and that we are sometimes not very good at dealing with. But again, I'm trying to keep this as a broader, more philosophical discussion in that I represent the AFL-CIO here in Seattle. The AFL-CIO is the largest organizational-based, largest organization in the country. We are the AFL-CIO is the only outfit in this country that has international relations with other organized labor groups in the rest of the world. We, through our business, which is representing people, which requires, yes, that we have members. I mean, there's times we kind of dodge that a little bit. Oh no, we're not. It's not about union members. It's about what's doing right. I think to myself, bullshit. This is about our business. It's about representing people and having a dues base coming in so that we can project our power financially. That's our business. We need to run a good business model, and that means organizing folks. You bet, having a dues base so we can have people that are able to build relationships internationally with labor organizations so that we can advocate for worldwide labor standards, so that we can use this wonderful media that we have to raise the awareness of what's going on, so that when Kathy Lee and Phil Knight are saying, "I didn't know this was going on," we can say, "Well, now you do. And what are you going to do about it?" And so that the companies can then be empowered either through their own largesse or the need to deal with the fact that it's going to affect business, to raise labor standards. Now, we sit back and go, that's because, in a large part, because of our advocacy, what we do, that's our business, is to raise that awareness. And the best thing you can do for an economy where you can get quality work at poverty wages In that kind of economy, what we bring to the table through our advocacy is a worldwide effort to raise labor standards worldwide. And we only can do that because we're in business in the most prosperous country in the world. Because we have a part of that economic structure that we can then project out into the world, into the global environment and say, this isn't right. And we provide an economic environment in this country where employers can say, and we want to do what's right with our employees, and we can afford to do it. Now let me just illustrate that a little bit. I don't want to go on too long here. Famous last words. But the story I like to tell about economic environments is why it's important to have a unionized environment, why it's kind of a false reality that some companies can say we really don't need a union because we take care of our people, is the Archie Bunker story. And a lot of you probably weren't around when the television show All in the Family was on TV, okay? But for my generation, it was a watershed comedy that was real. It was the first time we got beyond Ward and June Cleaver, and we were talking about real social issues in comedy television. Norman Lear was a genius in that he got it on the air and he was able to stay right on that line with comedy and social commentary. And he did it through the parody of a bigot. Carroll O'Connor was the actor who played Archie Bunker. Now the point is, I'm not going to go into the whole thing about how that shaped the public discourse. The point I like to make is, for those of you that remember the show, what was Archie Bunker's job? What did he do? He was a taxi driver. He was a New York taxi driver. Now, he lived in Queens, Bronx. He lived in a middle-class section of New York. Had his own house, right? Lived the middle-class life as a taxi driver. Now, think about that now. What has changed since that show has been on? You don't find middle-class folks in New York or any other major city in this country providing taxi services, taxi drivers. Why is that? Because in the late 70s, the taxi companies decided that through employment contracts, direct employment contracts, U.S. labor law, they were able to bust the unions. I'll go into jargon a little bit. Bust the unions, right? So now, taxi companies throughout this country are forced to rely on low-wage immigrant workforce to provide a service. Okay? So it doesn't matter if you've got, and I don't know if these kind of companies are out there, but it doesn't matter if you're running a good taxi company. If you want to provide taxi service in New York City, it doesn't matter. If you want to try to provide a middle-class wage for your workers in the taxi business in New York City, because you're not going to be in business. The only way you can get that done, if you're going to run that service, is with low-wage immigrant workforces. So, how does this all kind of come together in my mind? It comes together in this regard. You know, I was dealing with a developer the other day about unionization issues, and he was asking me about a development company. I won't use the name. And he said, are they a good company or are they a bad company? Are they a Walmart or are they a Costco? And I said, man, I think they're more Costco than Walmart. And I thought about that, you know. Now, how did that perception come to be? How can Costco be the good company? Well, one, they've got enlightened management, but they're also operating, by and large, in a unionized environment. To the degree that they compete with Albertsons and Safeway and Kroger's, and I know we can debate whether that's a direct competition or not, but the point is that retail clerks in that environment, because of the union density in that environment, are expecting a certain middle-class wage, and in order to compete and have the quality employees in that, outfits like Costco are allowed to enrich their workers. Now, if any of you have noticed as follow this, Costco is under pressure by the economic community to maximize their profits. If they would adjust their wage structure to the level of a Walmart, they could return more investment to their companies, or to their investors. They're criticized for not doing that. Because why? Because ultimately Costco's job is to produce profit, maximize their profit. They've got enlightened leadership right now that's bucking that, but you know that leadership's going to go away. And as they become a mature company, what's going to happen? So at some point, it isn't about whether you've got enlightened leadership or not. It's about what's your economic environment, and how does an independent labor movement positively affect that? So, how does this all come together? If I don't have a business, right? If I don't have a relationship with companies that take care of their workers,